you have not seen parts 1 through 4, I will link them down below in the description. So, with that, sit back, relax, and let's get started. Number 41. The Pollock Sisters. In the 1940s, Florence and John Pollock were married, and in 1946, after having 2 sons, they welcomed their first daughter, who was named Joanna. In 1951, Florence gave birth to another baby girl named Jacqueline. Despite their age differences, the 2 girls had an extremely close relationship. Joanna liked to take care of Jacqueline and saw herself as the ultimate big sister. Since their mother was busy running the family's grocery delivery business, Joanna saw herself as a second mother to her little sister. They enjoyed playing dress up and pretend, and generally enjoyed being around each other. Eerily, Joanna would always state that she would never grow up to become a lady. She would always say that she would remain a child forever. No one took her seriously and chalked it up to the child's creative imagination. On May 7th, 1957, 6-year-old Jacqueline and 11-year-old Joanna were walking to church with a young neighborhood boy, as they often did. While they were walking, a car came up behind them and purposefully hit them, going at an incredibly high speed, killing all 3 of the children. The Pollock sisters died instantly, and the little boy they were with died from his injuries at the hospital. The woman who was driving the car had just lost her children in a custody battle and was feeling angry and upset, and was actually trying to take her own life. When learning about her children's deaths, Florence fell into a deep depression that lasted quite a long time. John, on the other hand, had the spiritual belief that the girls were in heaven, or that they would be reincarnated. He said he would have dreams about the girls, and also felt some sort of presence in their bedroom. He claimed that every time he would go in there, he felt like he wasn't alone. John always had a fascination with reincarnation and would pray to God to bring his daughters back. This put such a strain on their relationship that they almost got a divorce. However, they stayed together and got pregnant again. From the beginning of the pregnancy, John thought that there were two babies, despite the doctor only claiming one. However, John would keep insisting that there were two, and the doctor was proved wrong on the day that twins Jillian and Jennifer were born on October 4th, 1958. Twins never ran in the family, and Florence never felt like she had two fetuses growing inside her. Eerily, the newborn twins had the exact same birthmarks that Joanna and Jacqueline had, and it was this that Florence started to seriously consider her husband's beliefs. When the twins were old enough to talk, they began identifying and requesting toys that had belonged to their sisters who had passed on. And they would also point out landmarks that only Joanna and Jacqueline would have known, like the school they attended. Plus, sometimes they would panic upon seeing cars and knew about street safety without either of their parents telling them about it. The story of the Pollock sisters made its way to Dr. Ian Stevenson, a psychologist who studied reincarnation. After studying thousands of reincarnation cases, Dr. Stevenson wrote a book telling of 14 he believed to have been real, including that of the Pollock sisters. Whether or not the actual occurrence of reincarnation exists has yet to be explained. Number 42. The disappearance of Paula Jean Welden. On December 1st, 1946, a sophomore at Bennington College, 18-year-old Paula Jean Welden told her roommate, Elizabeth Parker, she was going for a long walk, but failed to return back to the shared space. Local witnesses reported having seen her on the 270-mile trail called Vermont's Long Trail that cuts through Vermont to the Canadian border. A search party was immediately formed, but no clues were found on the trail. Soon after, the newspaper, the Bennington Banner, said that tantalizing and unquestionably strange leads began to materialize and be reported. There was one in particular made by a Massachusetts waitress that she'd served an agitated young woman matching Paula's description. Upon learning of this lead, Paula's father disappeared for 36 hours, supposedly in pursuit of the lead. Nevertheless, the authorities thought it was strange, and it led to him becoming a prime suspect in Paula's disappearance. Stories began circulating Paula's home life was not nearly as idyllic and picturesque as her parents had initially reported to the police. Apparently, Paula had not returned home for Thanksgiving the week prior, and she may have been upset about a disagreement with her father. While claiming his innocence, Paula's father posed a theory that Paula was distraught about a boy she liked at school, and that perhaps the boy should have been a suspect. Over the next decade after Paula's disappearance, a local Bennington man twice bragged to his friends that he knew where Paula's body was buried. However, he was unable to lead the police to any body. With no evidence of a crime, no body, and no forensic clues, the case grew cold, and the fate of Paula Jean Welden was never discovered. Number 43. The disappearance of the Flannan Isles lighthouse keepers. The Flannan Isles is a group of rocky, uninhabited islands off the western coast of Scotland. The islands are best known to be adored by sheep, and shepherds often sail their flock there to graze. Sheep that grazed on the Flannan Isles were believed to give birth to twins or recover from illness. Despite it being a paradise for the woolly critters, rumors of a haunted spirit have prevented shepherds from ever staying overnight. In 1896, the Board of Trade funded the construction of a lighthouse on the largest of the Flannan Isles, Eileen Moore. In December 1899, the lighthouse was completed and lit for the first time. 4 lighthouse keepers were assigned to maintain the lighthouse and work a rotation of 6 weeks on, 2 weeks off. This meant there were always 3 men on the island at the same time. In mid-December 1900, the 3 men on the island were the 43-year-old principal keeper, James Duguet, who possession, Moore reported. I found the beds empty, just as they had left them in the early morning. The bodies of the 3 men were never found, and their disappearance still remains a mystery to this day. Number 44. The murder of Betty Shanks. On September 19th, 1952, 22-year-old Betty Shanks got off the train at Days Road Terminus in Grange, which is a suburb of Brisbane, Queensland, in Australia. She was attending classes at the University of Queensland, and after she got off the train, started her short walk home. However, she would never arrive. Her violently beaten body was found on the corner of Carberry and Thomas Streets in the garden of a house the next morning at 5:35 a.m. by a policeman who lived nearby. At the time, it became one of Queensland's most notorious investigations ever. Despite many theories, a suspect was never convicted, and her murder is still unsolved. There are many books written by authors speculating who did it, and many have come forward and confessed, but all of them have proven to be false. As of today, there is still a $50,000 reward. Number 45. The Leatherman. The Leatherman was a particular vagabond who was famous for wearing his handmade leather clothes and traveled an annual route between the Connecticut River and the Hudson River, roughly from 1857 to 1889. His repeating voyage took him to certain towns in western Connecticut and eastern New York, and he would return to each town every 34 to 36 days. Living in rock shelters, he stopped at towns along his 365-mile loop for food and supplies. It was unclear what he did for work. One shopkeeper kept a record of his usual store order: 1 loaf of bread, a can of sardines, 1 pound of fancy crackers, a pie, 2 quarts of coffee, 1 gill of brandy, and a bottle of beer. An article from the Burlington Free Press, dating to April 7th, 1870, refers to him as the leather-clad man and states that he rarely spoke, and when people addressed him, he would simply speak in monosyllables. According to rumors, he was from Picardy, France. Even though he was fluent in French, he communicated mostly with grunts and gestures, rarely using the little English that he knew. When asked about his background, he would abruptly end the conversation. Even upon his death was walking along a beach in British Columbia when she found a sneaker that had washed up on shore. To her horror, she found that a human foot was inside. Since then, a number of severed feet have washed ashore. The feet have been connected to 5 men, 1 woman, and 3 of unknown sex. Throughout the years, the case still remains a mystery, with many theories floating around the general public and the media as to who the feet belonged to. The Vancouver police managed to identify one foot in 2008, matching its DNA to a man who was described as suicidal. The authorities were then able to match 2 other found feet to a woman who was also believed to have committed suicide. Because of these findings, many speculate that the feet belong to those who jumped off of a bridge to their deaths. However, because of the rarity of only feet and no other body parts showing up, some believe they were those of the victims of the tsunami in 2004, since the make of the shoes has been all manufactured before then. Whatever the source these feet are coming from, they have left the world and authorities stumped. Number 47. The case of Jeanette DePalma. In 1972, in Springfield, New Jersey, a dog brought a decomposing forearm to its owner. They quickly alerted police, and this prompted a police search, and a body was soon found afterward atop a cliff. The body was identified as Jeanette DePalma, a 16-year-old who had gone missing for 6 weeks. Like rapid fire, rumors about the cause of her death began to spread. The hill where she was discovered was covered with occult symbols, and many were led to believe that her body was placed on a makeshift altar. Many locals, plus even some police members, pointed their fingers at a coven of witches, otherwise known as Satanists, who were rumored to have used DePalma for a human sacrifice. Because of a flood, many of the case's details have been destroyed. However, some reports from local papers mention that police couldn't determine the cause of death due to her badly decomposed body. Authorities investigated a local homeless man who was a prime suspect, only to find no connection with the killing. Many believed that DePalma may have provoked a group of Satan-worshipping teens at her high school, since she was involved with a group that helped drug addicts find their faith in Christ. To this day, her death remains unsolved. Number 48. The Vanishing of Cynthia Anderson. was filled with prayer meetings, swimming events, camping events, seasonal parties, and Sunday worship, all organized by the church she and her family attended. Cynthia's father, Michael Anderson, described his daughter as a quiet and obedient kind of girl who never made waves, yet had lots of friends. Cynthia was also a very attractive young woman, and even though her parents had very strict rules, she had a boyfriend who was also a member of the church. That summer, her father reported that Cynthia was spending a lot of time on her face and becoming a bit of a debutante. Cynthia worked as a legal secretary in Toledo, Ohio, but was preparing to quit to attend Bible college, the same one her boyfriend attended. By the way the job was going, her last day couldn't come soon enough. The previous year, on a wall across from Cynthia's desk that was viewable from outside the window, someone had spray painted the words, "I love you, Cindy," in large letters, with smaller by GW in the corner. Cynthia was the only Cindy on that side of the strip mall where the graffiti was located. It seemed intentionally placed that only Cynthia could see it. However, Cynthia had no idea who GW could have been. The message remained there for 6 months until it was eventually covered up. The message appeared again, this time in bigger letters, but it became the least of Cynthia's problems. During the summer of 1981, Cynthia was being harassed by a number of anonymous phone calls with disturbing messages. This frightened her, and she began experiencing nightmares about being attacked by a man. It got so bad that her job even installed an emergency buzzer at her desk, and she kept her office doors locked at all times. Unfortunately, these precautions wouldn't be enough. On August 4th, 1981, Cynthia skipped breakfast and left her parents' house around 8:30 a.m. to go to work. She arrived at the law office and was seen as late as 9:45 a.m. Around lunchtime, her employer, James Rabbit, arrived at the office. The lights and radio were on, but there was no sign of Cynthia. The scent of nail polish remover hung in the air, and there was no note, and the phones were still ringing off the hook. There were no signs of struggle, and according to reports, the office door was still locked from the inside. Though her car was still in the parking lot, her keys and purse were missing. Eerily, June 4th, 2010, 7-year-old Kyron Horman was dropped off at Skyline Elementary School in Portland, Oregon, by his stepmother, Terry. She stayed with him as he attended the school's science fair and walked him down the hall to his class and left the school around 8:45 a.m. However, he was never seen in his first class and was instead marked as absent that day. At 3:30 p.m., Terry and her husband, Kyron's father Kane, walked with their daughter to the bus stop to meet Kyron. The bus driver told them that the boy had not boarded the bus after school, however, and to call the school to ask where he might be. Terry did ring the school, only to be informed by the school secretary that, as far as anyone there knew, Kyron had not been at school and that he had been marked absent. Realizing then that the boy was missing, the secretary called the police. The search party for Kyron was extensive and primarily focused on the 2-mile radius around Skyline Elementary and on Sauvie Island, which lies 6 miles away. The search for Kyron, which happened over a span of 10 days, was the largest in Oregon history and included over 1,300 searchers from Oregon, Washington, and California. A reward posted for information leading to the discovery of Kyron, which was initially $25,000, rose to $50,000 in July 2010. Despite the long search, no evidence was ever found. Legal proceedings, including a lawsuit between Kyron's mother, Desiree Young, who claims that Terry Horman is responsible for the disappearance of Kyron, is still ongoing. However, Kyron's whereabouts and the circumstances surrounding his disappearance is still a mystery. And number 50. The bizarre deaths at Dyatlov Pass. On the first night of February in 1959, 9 hikers died mysteriously in the mountains of what is now Russia. On the night of the incident, the group had set up camp on a slope, enjoyed dinner, and got ready for bed, but never returned home. On February 26th, a search party found the hikers' abandoned tent, which had been ripped open from the inside. Surrounding the area were footprints left by the group, some wearing socks, some wearing a single shoe, some barefoot, all of which followed to the edge of a forest that was nearby. 2 bodies were found there, shoeless and wearing only underwear. Initially, it was believed they died by hypothermia, assault. Another body had third-degree burns. One had been vomiting blood, and the last one was missing a tongue. Some of their clothing had been found to be radioactive. The morbid theories that floated included KGB interference, drug overdose, UFO, gravity anomalies, the Yeti, and a terrifying but real phenomenon called infrasound, in which the wind interacts with the topography to create a barely audible hum that can induce powerful feelings of nausea, panic, dread, chills, nervousness, raised heartbeat rate, and breathing difficulties. The true cause of death for these adventurers still remains unsolved. So that is the end at number 50. I hope you have enjoyed this 5-part series. As always, thank you so